mentioned Colonel Douglas Macgregor, that there was discussion or put a push in Washington to deliver MiG-29 fighters to Ukraine, I guess, so the ghost of Kiev can get up there and continue knocking down dozens and dozens of Russian jets. Seemingly fantastical. Nancy Pelosi, in her rambling discussion of the war yesterday, I kind of am tempted to play video of it, where she fantasized about taking out the Russian convoy, wished for the MiG-29 delivery from Poland, and said the U.S. would backfill it. And this is obviously because, you know, Ukrainian pilots are trained to fly those and not U.S. aircraft, et cetera. But it seems like such an insane plan that even Biden opposed it. And so,
first of all, let's give credit where credit's due, Max.
Yeah.
The president of the United States has made some very good decisions. He's made it very clear. Number one, we will not send any ground forces into Ukraine. Remember, there was some discussion at the beginning of whether or not our forces or troops would go into Ukraine to rescue American citizens. Right. Absolutely not. We will not go into Ukraine under any circumstances on the ground. Then, when the new no-fly zone was raised, it's perfectly obvious that if you send any NATO aircraft into Ukrainian airspace, the Russians are going to shoot them down, in which case you're at war with Russia. He said, absolutely not. So then they came up with the third scheme, and this was, of course, Anthony Blinken, who kept pushing for this on the assumption that, well, we shouldn't be afraid of Mr. Putin. Mr. Putin won't respond. I listened to Senator Lindsey Graham, a man with infinite military experience as an attorney serving in the Staff Judge Advocates Corps on military duty in places like Iraq. And he certainly understands that no matter what we do, Mr. Putin won't respond. Mr. Putin is intimidated by us, and we can do pretty much what we want. This is a huge problem. For the first time, certainly in living memory, I heard Senator Rubio actually say something yesterday that I thought was exceptionally intelligent. And he announced to everyone, Russia is not Iraq. Gosh, what an insight. Russia is not Iraq. And therefore, he said, no, we can't do the no-fly zone and we can't transfer those MiGs. So there is some evidence for rationality in the Senate. But unfortunately, people like Graham continue to argue. You've got Mr. Blinken, who has some rather strange ideas about what the Russians will or won't do. He's going to continue to push for dumb ideas. The key question is, can President Biden retain his presence of mind and continue to say no to these dumb ideas? I don't know. I hope so. So I credit him with common sense on that level. And I think he's letting the people on the Hill say and do otherwise what they want because he knows they're answering to donors. I mean, we don't care about the people that elect us to office anymore. They're irrelevant. Donors are everything. Donors run the city. So they're responding to donors who obviously want to find ways to widen and escalate the conflict. But I don't think the president does, and he will stop it any opportunity he has to do so.
Well, it sounds like, and this goes directly to my question, it sounds like you're identifying a particular faction in the Biden administration that wants to escalate this war. That is the real war party, and you're locating them in the State Department. Based on your own experience in an administration, I know that the kind of neoconservative and more hardline elements were not elevated the way they are in the Biden administration. But can you just address maybe the tension between the State Department, particularly the Blinken State Department, and the Pentagon, which seemed opposed to this MiG-29 transfer idea?
The Department of Defense, at least on the uniform side, is dominated by people who, for the most part, don't want to have to fight a real war against a real enemy that can fight back. They know that we're not prepared for that. They know that our forces are woefully unprepared, untrained, and ill-equipped. They know this because they've had a hand in creating the mess that we have today inside the Department of Defense. So someone like General Mark Milley will advise, under no circumstances provoke the Russians, under no circumstances drag us into this. We're not ready. That much is clear. The problem is there are other hotheads, and I think it's a mistake to talk exclusively about the administration. I think we need to understand that this really is the uniparty. Democrat versus Republican labels are irrelevant. They're all responding to the same collection of donors. The donors want conflict. The donors enjoy conflict, enrich themselves as a result of conflict, and the donors grossly underestimate the dangers because the donors have no real experience on the ground in the military. They don't know what they're dealing with. I read a number of reports that were given by former soldiers in the United States Army, Special Operations Forces, and Marines who have since been to Ukraine and come back. And they recorded with horror what it was like to fight against the Russians and said, don't come over here. If you do, you're going to get killed. This is a real army. This is real high intensity conventional warfare. Forget it. Our experience is irrelevant. And they're right. People that were able to essentially do whatever they want because we dominated people in Iraq and Afghanistan with overwhelming firepower, people that had no armies, no air forces, no air defenses, they know that this will not work. Problem is that that's irrelevant to the people on the Hill. They are, again, performing for donors. And sadly, there are people out there in the United States, I call it the Bombs Away Club. There are people in the Bombs Away Club who are always prepared to bomb anybody and attack anybody. They think this is some manifestation of our greatness. And then you have the preoccupation with bullying everyone. The State Department is accustomed to bullying others, bullying them into acceptance of whatever policy stance we want them to take. I think that's going to end as a result of this conflict, because over time, many of the Europeans have now realized what the Indians, the Chinese, most Asians have figured out, most of Africa and Latin America, that we are bullies, that we inevitably end up in a position where if you don't agree with us, we brand you as the enemy and we try to punish you with control of our financial system. I think that's going to end. I don't see this ending badly necessarily for Russia. Russia is going to be hurt. Anytime you fight any war, you were hurt. Look at us during the Second World War. How long did it take us to recover from that war? And it was not easy. But the point is, they will come out of it. And the Chinese, thanks to Jake Sullivan, who met with the foreign minister in Rome, have seen the wisdom of reaffirming their support for Russia now, because he went in and essentially threatened the Chinese. Our instantaneous response to anyone who doesn't agree is to threaten. We don't practice something the British Empire used to practice, at least until World War I, which was economy of enemies. We go in and say, you're with us or you're against us. Whereas the British usually went into some place and said, well, who can we work with? And who is neutral? And who can we bring on side? And who is the real problem? Perhaps we can isolate that individual or those people. We don't think in those terms. And this is part of the moral hypocrisy, but it comes with the globalist, Marxist, elitist mentality. We have a monopoly, they think, on wisdom, morality, decency, and anyone who opposes them is, of course, the opposite.